The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of Halloween. In the small, secluded town of Black Hollow, nestled deep within the forests of Vermont, the season of fall was more than just a time for pumpkin spice and cozy sweaters. It was a time when the veil between the living and the dead grew thin, and the town's dark history whispered through the rustling trees. Sarah Collins had always been drawn to Black Hollow. As a child, she had spent summers there with her grandmother, listening to tales of the town's eerie past. But now at 27, Sarah was returning for a different reason. She had received an invitation, a letter, handwritten on aged parchment, inviting her to a gathering at the infamous Black Hollow Manor. The letter was signed by a man named Thomas Blackwood, a name she had never heard before, but one that sent a shiver down her spine. The manor, a sprawling Gothic structure with towering spires and ivy-covered walls, had been abandoned for decades. It was said to be cursed, a place where the shadows moved on their own, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Sarah had always been skeptical of such stories, but something about the invitation felt off. The handwriting was unnervingly precise, the ink a deep, almost black red. And the words, they seemed to beckon her, to call her back to a place she had never truly left. The drive to Black Hollow was long and winding, the road lined with trees whose leaves had turned a fiery orange and red. As Sarah approached the town, she noticed how quiet it was. There were no children playing in the streets, no cars passing by. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. When she reached the manor, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn. The front gates were rusted and creaked loudly as she pushed them open. The sound echoed through the empty courtyard, making her heart race. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The interior of the manor was just as she had imagined, dark, dusty, and filled with the scent of old wood and mildew. The grand staircase loomed before her, its steps covered in a thick layer of dust. The walls were lined with portraits of people she didn't recognize, their eyes seeming to follow her as she moved. "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing through the empty halls. There was no response. She wandered through the manor, her footsteps echoing loudly in the silence. The further she went, the more she felt as though she was being watched. The air grew colder, and she could see her breath in the dim light. She reached a door at the end of a long hallway, its surface covered in intricate carvings of twisted vines and grotesque faces. She hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. Inside was a large circular room with a high ceiling. The walls were lined with bookshelves, their contents ancient and covered in dust. In the center of the room was a large ornate table, surrounded by chairs. On the table was a single, unlit candle. Sarah stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread, as if she had stepped into a place where she didn't belong. She turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing through the room. Sarah spun around, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She tried the door, but it was locked. She was trapped. "Welcome, Sarah," a voice said, smooth and cold. She turned to see a man standing at the far end of the room. He was tall and thin, with pale skin and dark, sunken eyes. His hair was black and slicked back, and he wore a suit that looked as though it had been tailored decades ago. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her voice trembling. "I am Thomas Blackwood," the man said, his lips curling into a faint smile. "And you are here because you were chosen." "Chosen for what?" Sarah asked, her mind racing. "For the gathering," Thomas said, his voice low and menacing. "Every year on the night when the veil is thinnest, we come together to celebrate." Sarah's eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out, but the walls seemed to close in around her, the shadows growing darker and more menacing. "You don't understand," Thomas said, stepping closer. "You were chosen because of your connection to this place. Your grandmother, she was one of us." Sarah's blood ran cold. Her grandmother had always been secretive about her past, but Sarah had never imagined this. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your grandmother was a member of our society," Thomas said, "a group of individuals who have dedicated their lives to the study of the occult. And now it is your turn to take her place. Sarah shook her head, backing away. No, this is insane. I don't believe you. Thomas's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too white. Belief is not required, he said.